Hey, hi everyone. I hope you're doing good. And in this video, we're going to talk about how you want to implement the audit trail. Specifically, if you are based out of India, there is a specific requirement of maintaining an audit trail as per the Rule 11G, Section 128 of the Companies Act 2013 to at the database level. Now, this requirement came back in I think April 2023, and through some FAQ they clarified that audit trail is required to be maintained at both the application level as well as database level, and it's management primary responsibility to maintain the audit trail. And as an auditor, as a statutory auditor, we are required to report on whether the audit trail is maintained at both the application as well as database layer. So the objective of this video is to assist the auditors on what things need to be checked and what things need to be taken into considerations while checking the audit trail at a database level, specifically in Microsoft SQL Server. Now there are a variety of SQL databases, like there is a MariaDB, there is a PostgreSQL, there is also a MySQL, which is an open source fork of the SQL databases. But what I have seen is that popularly Microsoft SQL Server is widely used for many of the applications. Along with that, Oracle is there and SAP HANA database is there. So today's video we are going to deep dive into how we can establish the audit trail and what queries we need to run and what things we need to check while giving the comfort on the audit trail. So I just prepared some kind of work programs I will just present you. So as I earlier mentioned, there are many SQL databases like the MS SQL, MySQL, MariaDB and PostgreSQL. The today's topic is specifically on Microsoft SQL Server, and in this Microsoft SQL Server there are totally 4 methods to establish the audit trail, which can be compliant with the Rule 11G requirement. We will go one by one. The first one is the database audit specification. I will not speak much more on that because there is another worksheet which I have prepared, which will give you the differentiation between all these methods. So, and the database audit specification mainly focuses, as the word suggests, database. It is applicable to only particular one database, while the server audit specification is something which will be applicable to all the databases which has been created in that particular Microsoft SQL Server. So this is a differentiation, quick difference between these two, and these two methods are something which is given by Microsoft in their Microsoft SQL Server databases. Third one, which you might have seen in other databases as well, like Oracle or any other form of the SQL databases, trigger based auditing. Now trigger, what does is that trigger can be a DML trigger or DDL trigger, but what crux is of the triggers is that whenever any kind of DML command has been executed on a specified table, the trigger will fire, and it will have the main table as well as a history table, which is also called as shadow table, and all the data regarding the date, timestamp, the username and the old value is something which is maintained in that history tables. So that can be also used to compliant with this requirement. There are other mechanisms which might include your third-party audit tools like the PAM tools, which can be Arcos is one of the popular. There is Iraja and CyberArk tool as well. So in this today's video, we are going to focus on only these three, which is database audit specification, server audit specification and trigger based auditing. We are not going to cover the other mechanism because that is going to be very PAM specific and the tool specific, and the client need to again pay the extra bear the extra cost to deploy those tools in the environment. Okay, now coming back to the differentiation between these three methods, as earlier said, the crux of the difference between the database audit and server audit is nothing but the database audit, as the word suggests, is applicable only to one particular database, while the server is something which is applicable to multiple databases. Trigger, as I mentioned earlier, it creates a main table and as well as the history and shadow tables, and the old value is something which can be maintained in the history tables. So in database audit trail, most of the cases, be it Oracle or S4 HANA, we have seen that old value is always a concern of maintaining the log of old value. But I believe the trigger is the only one which can suffice this, because most of the PAM tools as well as the databases audit logging mechanisms provided by the vendor like Microsoft, Oracle or SAP, they capture the statement, or it is also called as keystroke logging, which is nothing but the command which is executed by the DBA user that is getting logged. But to establish old value and new value, trigger can be used. I have not seen trigger in more complex environment, but as it obviously it affects your performance by a lot. So if you have a simpler and non-complex setup, I think triggers can be very useful to create a good audit trail to maintain the traceability. Now, initialization parameters. So if you are aware of Oracle and SAP S4 HANA databases, they do have an initialization parameter. Similar to that stuff, MS SQL also have the initialization parameter, which is called as audit. And in case of trigger, there is no initialization parameter. Are changes to initialization parameter by default recorded? So yes, in case of database audit specification and server audit specification, these changes are by default recorded. Along with that, we also get the creation date as well as the last modification date of these audits. In case of triggers, it is not applicable. Now again, in every databases, I think this is applicable to most of the databases. Whenever there is no a single toggle by turning on, it will capture all the activity, right? You need to specify the database, what schema you want to audit, what tables you want to audit, which users you want to audit, right? Now, similar to Oracle and S4 HANA as well as, is there any need to create an audit policies in MS SQL database? So the answer is yes. In case of database audit specification, we call it as the database audit policies or specification, where we need to configure what exactly we want to audit, and it's a way we are telling the database this is the user ID, this is the schema or the table, and these are the actions which I want to audit. In trigger, usually the entity is required to create the DML triggers. Again, there are two types of trigger which we will come back. But in trigger, it's kind of configuration of trigger. It's nothing but the audit policy. Now, in case we have the audit policy, are the changes to the audit policy by default recorded? So in case of database audit specification and server audit specification, by default, this changes to audit policies are not recorded. So you need to set up a specific group which is called as audit change group. What is this audit change group? We will be seeing that in a practical demo later. But by setting up this audit change group, you will be able to log the date, time and the user who is disabling the database audit or server audit specification, as the case may be. In case of trigger, now triggers, what I can think of is disabling or enabling or modifying or deleting of trigger by default is not required. A DDL trigger is again something which need to be configured specifically in order to capture any kind of changes to triggers. Default location of the audit trail. Now this is again a OS path in case of server audit and database audit specification, because it's a Windows environment. So we will be seeing that where we have to configure those OS path, and those are nothing but your SQL audit files where all the audit records are stored, and we can view those audit records. In case of triggers, it's always to be database, because the history and the shadow tables are nothing but the mirror tables of your main tables, which is again maintained in database. So this was a quick differentiation between all these three methods which we are going to showcase. Now let's jump to SSMS. I have already set up the SSMS which is here, which is the 2022 edition. So let's start with the database audit specification. So in database audit specification, as I earlier mentioned, there is a global initialization parameter which we need to check, which is called as audits, right? Now there are two ways again to see from GUI as well as from the query. Let's start with the GUI. So you need to drop down to this server. Now there are databases which has been created. You need to go to the security, and as you can see here, audits. Now there is no plus icon. That means the audits are not created, right? So we'll create the audit, and there is also a query to view this whether the audits are created or not. So I will just copy this and I will just paste this, Control A, execute. As you can see, the output is nil because there are no audits created. Okay, so let's quickly create an audit. What I will do is that I will just right click on this and click on new audit. So once I click on new audit, this window is getting appeared. We need to give some key important inputs while creating the audit. One is the name, so I will just mention audit underscore trail. Q, we can keep it at by default. Audit destination, very important. There are three types of audit destination. One is the file. If you select this, it will be stored under the OS. Security log and application log is something I have not seen quite often, but these are something which you can see through Windows event log mechanism. So as of now, I'm just keeping it as by default file. and I have created a path where we can give this audit record. So as you can see, before even making this video, I have created this path and there are some audit files. So let's just delete this and start from the fresh. I will give this path to the database audit specification. Maximum rollover files, we can keep it as it is. Maximum files unlimited. Okay. Reserved disk. So there is one more parameter which we need to take into consideration, is maximum file size. This should be 0, because let's say if I set it this something to, let's say, 2 GB, right, and click on OK, right, I'm keeping a threshold for my audit log size, which will be 2 GB. So if the audit log is for 2 GB, and let's say if I perform any activity, it will not record because I have set the maximum threshold. So this should be unlimited. And then I think once you can review these details and you can just click on OK, right? We go back to the SSMS. As you can see, audit trail audit has been created, and if you look at, there is a red cross mark. That's an indication that this is not enabled. So by default these audits are not enabled. You need to specifically enable it. So I'm just again going to run this quickly. As you can see, there is the data is appearing because we have created the audit. I'm just gonna enable it quickly. We go right click on it and just enable audit. It is giving me a pop-up that the audit has been successfully enabled. Now I'm again running this query. Now as an auditor, we need to run this first query. This is the global initialization parameter for server audit specification as well as the database audit specification. So if the output is null, that means the audit is not there. So the first two methods are not even applicable. We just need to look at the triggers, and if those are not even available, the audit is not maintained at a database level. Now what are the things we need to look at in this? So I'm just here. Okay, so first thing is we need to look at the name of the audit which is there. Second important is the creation date. Now from this you will get an idea where on which date the audits are created, because the audit will be effective from that date only. Modified date is also important, because if the audit is modified, it will capture, but it is kind of false positive because it's a last modification date. So even if you change the name of the audit, it will capture. So in case any kind of audit having the modified date falling into your audit period, you need to discuss it with the client. What are the reasons why this audit was modified, and you need to assess the impact accordingly. There are other columns as well, which is state enabled. Very important. This has to be 1, because if it is 0, it will be disabled state, right? So this has to be 1 if the audit is enabled or not. Max file size has to be 0, because as I mentioned earlier, if it is having some kind of so you set the threshold of 2 GB, then the audit records will be saved till 2 GB only, and any actions subsequent to that file size will not getting captured. There is one more path which is very important, which is nothing but your log file path. So this is nothing but the path which we gave while creating the audit. So this is the OS path where all the audit records are going to be stored, right? And there is one hidden column. I'm not really sure, because the Microsoft documentation doesn't talks about this column. It talks about retention days, but as an auditor we should look for, because if we set this as, let's say, 10 days, it's kind of indirectly I'm setting a retention policy of this, right? So if I set this as a 10 days, then it will keep the record for the last 10 days only, and rest of it will purge or delete it, right? So if it is 0, which is the default value, that means it is written for indefinite period. So there is one more aspect in India for this requirement, is that this audit logs has to be written for 8 years. So this has to be either 0 or 8 into 365, which will be 2920 you need to mention. So these are nothing but the columns which we just discussed. We need to check firstly, right? And let's say if you are comfortable with the audit which is created, you need to look for the database audit specification, right? So there is again a query for it. So we'll just run this query and check whether there are any database audit specifications created. So as you can see, there are no database audit specifications. In the GUI, you need to again go to the databases. So for the purpose of this, I have already created audit_trail, a test databases, and you need to go to the security. And as you can see here, the database audit specification, there is no plus icon. That means the database audit specification is not created, which is similar to what we executed just before seeing in GUI. Now to create the database audit specification, we will again right click on it and click on new database audit specification. Now this is a very important window as an auditor. So before that, I will just explain you that once you create an audit, right, this audit needs to be linked to either a server audit specification or a database audit specification, right? You cannot create server audit specification or database audit specification without creating audit. So this mapping has to be there, right? So we go back to the SSMS. So as you can see, the database audit specification is by default, the name is that, and then you can change the name. Let's say I will just maintain db_audit_specification. Now important step is that I need to map this database audit specification to audit which we created earlier. I'll just click on this, and now this is the place where you are directly telling databases what actions do I want to audit, what tables, what schemas, what databases, what users I want to audit. Okay, now the requirement of the rule 11G is that any change in books of accounts which has been directly made via databases, right, it should keep a log of it, right? Now DML, which is a data manipulation language, including the insert, update, delete commands, are usually used to update any tables forming part of books of accounts, right? Before setting this up or before checking this, you must be having a list of tables which is impacting your books of accounts for that particular client, because it may not be visible for the entity to enable the audit tool at database level for all the tables due to XYZ reasons, right? So that exhaustive list of tables must be handy available with you, right? So in this, there are multiple scenarios. I will go through each scenario. In total there are 4 scenarios which can comply the rule 11G requirement. So let's see one by one. So in database audit specification, if you click on this drop down audit action type, you can see at the very end there are insert, update and delete, right? So we are just quickly going to select insert. Now the next thing, it is asking me object class, and if I click on object class, there are 3 possible ways I can set up the audit, right? So let's say I select the databases. Now it will ask me the object name, which is nothing but the database name. So I can actually browse from the available databases. So audit trail is the databases which we have created. I will just click on this OK, right, and I will click on OK, and it is asking me the principal name. Now principal name is nothing but the user roles, right? So if I want to, let's say, target my audit tool only to certain specified users having a DBA group, I will here specify that particular DBA role given to only those users. Now if I want to, let's say, audit all the users, now public is the role which is given to all the users. So I will just click on browse, and there should be a public. So as you can see, there is public. I will set it up. Okay, right. Now similar activity I will just quickly do for update as well as delete. So just I'll just go on the audit trail databases and click on this, and the public rule, similar for the delete action as well. Okay, now this is the first scenario, which probably whenever you are going on the call and discussing it with client what are the audit policies or database audit specifications which has been created, you might see this kind of scenario where they have enabled the DML commands, which is insert, update, delete on the databases, the name of the database you can see, and on which users having this specified role, the public, which is indirectly giving hint that this is applicable to all users. Now what this will do is that whatever the DML commands on whatever the tables, right, it will keep a log of it because we have specified here the whole databases. So the scope of this scenario is that it will log the actions, specifically DML commands, by all the users on all the tables pertaining to all the schemas, right? Because we have not given here any particular schema, any particular table. That means it is going to capture all the commands. Let's say this is not feasible because it will have the size issue and the performance impact as well, and I want to specify only particular schemas which is impacting my books of accounts. Voila, you can do that as well. The next option is the schema which we are going to use. So I will just quickly select schema in all three. Now, once you select the schema, the object name you need to give is the name of the schema. So I'll just minimize this and probably I can go to the SSMS. This is the audit trail, the databases. There is this table. As you can see, there is this hr.employees. So employees is the table, HR is a schema. Now this is something which we are going to use as an example. So what I will do is that I will just click on this and browse, and I need to see for a schema called as HR. As you can see, it's there. So I'll just copy this and set it up for the update and delete commands as well. Now this is the scenario number 2 which you can see, where we have specified the DML commands on all the tables which are coming under the umbrella of HR schema, and again for all the users, right? Now HR schema is just taken for the example. There can be multiple schema because those schemas should indirectly cover all the tables forming part of your books of accounts. So this is the scenario number 2. Let's say the entity wants to specify only specific tables. They don't want to specify any schema, but only the tables, right? You can do that as well. So you need to select the third option, which is object. Let me do that for the rest of the commands as well. And then you need to give the object name, which will be the name of the table. So there is one table called as employees. I will just click on this and copy this. So indirectly it is also setting up schema for me. As you can see, HR is a schema, employees is a table. So I will set it up for rest of the commands as well quickly. Now this is the third scenario which you can see, where the DML commands are configured on employees table forming part of HR schema for all the users, right? So in case of database audit specification, we saw these three scenarios. There is one more scenario which I will come to it. Yeah, these are the three scenarios you can see probably. Now to delete this, I will just select all this and press delete. Yeah. The fourth scenario is there is a special action group, right, which is called as a schema object access group. Now even if you pass any kind of DML command on any tables created in that particular databases, if you select this kind of audit action in your DB audit specification window, it will capture the DML commands, right? And once you select this, there is no need to set up object class, because it is not even allowing me to select neither the object class, schema name, nor even the principal. Indirectly giving a hint that once you select this, it is applicable to all the objects, which can be a schema, which can be a table as well, right? So I'm just going with this, but earlier three scenarios are also applicable. So I'm just hitting on OK. As you can see, database audit specification has been created, but there is a red cross mark. That means it is in a disabled state. So let me just right click on it to enable it. And we will again run the same query. As you can see, there is the database audit specification. What columns as an auditor we should look for is the name of the database audit specification, the creation date, that will give you a hint that when this database audit specification was created, modified date, can be false positive, you need to discuss it with the client, the state, very important, must be 1, right? So these are the important columns one need to look at. Alright, but apart from that, you need to also go to the path which I mentioned, which I will just reiterate, is that you need to go to the databases, look for the database, then go to the security folder here, and then go to the database audit specification. If you found, make sure it's in enable state, right click on it, properties, or you can just double click on it to pop up that window. And here you can see the exactly what kind of actions which has been configured. This kind of information is not available in this query output, so you need to take into consideration that as well. Okay, so we come back to our work program. We covered the audits first. The first step is done. The second step, where we cover the database audit specification. If no rows found, that means the database audit specification is not created. If it is there, we need to look for these columns. Also, you need to look for what kind of actions which has been configured. So 4 scenarios are mentioned here which we covered. Now the next step is that we enabled the DML commands on employees table. We need to see the records, right? But before seeing the records, I have some sample queries like insert, update, delete, so that we will just go through it. I will just run this. This is the table which is having 7 line items. It's a sample table and the test data which we have taken into consideration. Okay, so we'll just quickly do an update transaction as well as delete transaction, right? I'll just click on execute button, and once this has been done, we will just see the records. So there is a query to check the records. I'll just copy this query. Now there are some things to change. First is obviously the parameter path. So I'll just go to this path and change this. Okay, and yeah, I think I need to change only this because we are covering the SQL audit all the files. Our scope is insert, update, delete, and I will just change this to October so that it is covering data, right? Let's run this query. As you can see, there are some update, insert, and delete actions as well as. So you can see the event time which will give you the comfort on date and time, right? There is an action as well as. If you scroll to the right hand side, you can see the username who has done the activity, and there is also, I believe, the schema which has been affected, the object name, right? Right now just focus on only the employees table. We pass the insert, update, and delete, right? So insert, update, and delete, these were the 3 queries which has been run. The time is 18th October, which is now. So these are the crucial columns which we need to look for, and if we just widen this, we can see the entire statement, which is the first one was the insert command, the second one was the update command, and third one was the delete command, right? Okay, now this was the way you can enable the audit trail. But there are few things which we need to take from the auditor perspective, because we need to also give the comfort on tampering of the audit trail, which can result in disabling of audit or disabling of your database audit specification. So by default, the Microsoft SQL Server keeps the log of disabling or enabling of the audit. Okay, so let's say for example we go to the audit which is sitting under the security audit trail. Let's say I am disabling this. I have disabled the audit trail, and let's say I am again enabling this audit. Okay, what I'll do is that probably this is the same query. I will just change some which is AUSC. So I will just delete this. AUSC is the action ID which is used to check the events pertaining to changes in the session audits. Just execute this. As you can see, there are 4 actions. See, 2 actions when we enable the start audit at the start of it, and then 2 actions when we did the activity right now. So as you can see here, the date time is available, the user ID who has done this activity is available, and if we go to the statement, it will show null. But in the additional information, if we just widen it enough, As you can see, audit underscore trail is nothing but the name of the audit which is getting captured, and there is which you can see event enabled. So at the start we enabled the audit, right? We disabled the audit and we re-enabled it. So those are also getting locked. Now this is by default coming from the Microsoft. There is no setup need or no configuration needs to be done. Okay, but let's say this is just the audit. What if, let's say, one tries to disable the database audit specification, right? So for that as well, there is a specific group called as audit underscore change group, right? Unless you set up this in the policy or this window, where you will not be able to get the any kind of records pertaining to it. So what we'll do is that we'll just check action AL. It should not be there because we have not set up any kind of activities, the audit change group as well. So as of now, the output is no records found. But what we will do is that we'll go to the database audit specification and modify it. Now in order to modify it, I need to first disable this. So I will just going to disable this database audit specification, double click on it, and I will add one action called as audit change group. Now this audit change group will capture only disable of server audit specifications or database audit specification. If you re-enable it, it will not capture. But you can kind of find out, right? Once it has been disabled twice, right? That means in the, between the gap it was enabled throughout the period, right? But let's say if it is disabled, right, and there is no any activity or as on date you are, it is still showing disabled, that means it was disabled from that till the date you are checking. So you can get the idea. I think you will get more clarity when I show this. So let's save on this, and once it is saved, I need to enable this as well. Okay, now what we will do is that we will disable this audit database audit specification and we will re-enable it. And let's check this now. As you can see, there is one activity. See, by default it's capturing only disabled. So in my case, I disabled it only once after adding the audit underscore change group. So you can see the date and time, the action. You can also see the username, and then under the statement you can see specifically db underscore audit specification is the name of the database audit specification, and state is off. That gives the comfort or the indication that this database audit specification is turned off, right? So these are some of the steps which we need to check while assessing the audit related database level, specifically in database audit specification. Now if we go to the server audit specification, most of the things remain same. You check the global parameter which is same for both the database audit specification as well as server audit specification. Yes, the server audit specification, you need to create a server audit specification. So we'll just run this query to check whether there are any kind of server audit specification created or not. Right now it's blank. So what I'll do is that let's disable this audit specification and let's go to the server audit specification. So it is again sitting under your security, and then in this server audit specification there is no plus mark because we have not created a server audit specification. We'll right click on it and click on new server audit specification. You will see a similar window, right? Now again it will ask me to kind of get the audit trail. Now best practice is always to create two audits. One is for database audit and one is for the server audit. So I will just create one more quickly new audit. I will just keep the by default name. The path I will probably give a different file path. This is for the server audit specification, so I will just give this path. Yeah, I'll just click on OK. By default it is not enabled, so let me enable it. Once it is enabled, I can now create a server audit specification and I will give this link to this. Now the difference of server audit specification at the time of the configuration is that there is no insert update delete as we could see in the database audit specification, right? So that gives only one of the scenario, which is schema object access group, which can be which you can see while server audit specification, because that is the only available audit action type which can keep the log of the DML commands on the tables forming part of your books of accounts and which can indirectly comply with your requirement. Yeah, so we'll just click on OK, and again we need to click on enable, right? Okay, now quickly what I'm going to do is that let's say I'm going to change this parameters, and I'm going to update and delete this. Let's execute this. So both the commands are successfully run. I need to again change the path. So this is the path which I had to change, and action ID. So this will be IN or UP or DL, because we need to see for all the three, right? And let's just execute this. There are, as you can see, there is insert, there is update, as well as there is a delete, right? So even the server specification through schema object access group, you can see the statements which we have passed on. So update and delete, just focus on only these two tables. Employee underscore audit log is something, a third method is skipping the log of that as well. So that's the reason. So you can see the update statement, the delete statement which we have passed on. So this is the server specification by which you can keep a track of the DML commands. Again, the fourth and fifth step, which is nothing but the log of enabling and disabling audit as well as disabling of the server specification remains same. So let's say for example, if I disable this server specification, double click on it, and let's say if we add audit underscore change group, hit on OK, re-enable this, and then after enabling I'm disabling this and enabling this again, right? And in my action ID, I will put AL to keep track of those activities. So there is one activity because we disabled the server specification. So it works in a similar fashion as compared with the database audit specification. As you can see, the server audit specification was disabled on 18th October by this user. Yeah, so it has a thin line of difference, but it can be used in your particular scenario. Both these methods work closely together. Yeah, the third one is a trigger based. Now this is something which is probably applicable, or you can see in more non-complex or simple environment. I have already created triggers for this video, so let me just show you how you can see that. Is you need to go to the databases. Now triggers are always created on the tables, so you need to click on the tables, and there is, as you can see, there is this HR employees, and as I said earlier, that triggers create one more. It doesn't create actually, but it kind of moves the data of audit trail to a virtual table or a history table or a shadow table, which is nothing but your employees audit log. So to see the triggers, you need to click on the main table. In that, the triggers will be available. These are the triggers, right? See, as an auditor, you don't need to worry about the implementation of the audit trail. You have to check whether the triggers are created or not. So how we can check that? So there is a query for that. You can just copying this query quickly, and okay, just run this. Now there are some very important columns which we need to look for. One is obviously the name. This will the name of the trigger. The second one is the date of the creation, very important, because from that date only the audit trail will be available or effective. Modified date, as I mentioned earlier, it will be the last modification date. So even if you change the name of the trigger, it will keep the last modification date, so it is a false positive. So you need to look for if the modification date for any of the triggers is falling under your audit period. You need to discuss it with the client of and discuss what are the why there was a change has been made, and you need to assess the impact accordingly. There are last two columns which are very important, which is the mapping of that trigger with the schema and table. So this trigger is applicable to this schema and this table. Now As I mentioned earlier, you need to have a list of the tables forming part of books of accounts, and for each of those table there has to be at least three triggers. One is for insert, the second one is for update, and third one is for the delete, because we need to cover the DML triggers, right? So from this query you can get the overall view. The triggers are created, what is the date, and what are the tables under this, those are mapped. There is one more query which is very important, which will give you an idea on which are the commands which has been configured in those triggers, right? Let me just quickly run this query. So there are three triggers in this particular databases. Schema table, this is something which we already saw in the earlier query, but these four tables columns are particularly very important, because this will give you idea that this trigger has delete command configured in it, this trigger has insert command configured in it, and this trigger has update command configured in it, right? And also the status. Now the status must be 0, because that's an indication that these triggers are enabled, right? And as I mentioned earlier, each of the table forming part of books of account should have at least 3 triggers for insert, update, and delete each. From these two queries, you can get an idea from the auditor point of view whether the triggers are there or not, right? Now once you extract this data, you need to perform a walkthrough with the client, with the DBA, probably production environment or the test environment. You can try to get more comfort on changing the value in any table directly from the databases, and check both the main table as well as the history tables, which will capture the date, time, the old value, new value, and the actions which has been performed. And lastly, one more question is arising, that if someone disables or deletes this trigger, because see, triggers can be created, enabled, disabled, modified, or dropped, that is deletion of trigger. Is there any kind of log? So by default, as I mentioned earlier, there is no log as such, because these are the DMA triggers. In order to create a log of these activities, a DDL trigger which has to be configured. So a DDL trigger which will fire as and when any of the specified activities are done on specified triggers. So any of the activities which might include this creation, enable, disabling, or deletion of triggers on this DML triggers. So if any user tries to delete, or disable, or re-enable it, or create a trigger, so creation of trigger, you can say it can be captured from the creation date. So we're more concerned about enabling or disabling and deleting and modifying of the trigger. So a DDL trigger has to be configured. So this is something which is by default not available. Okay, I think so we covered this three methods in the Microsoft SQL databases. I want to reiterate the fact that this is applicable only to the MS SQL, that is a Microsoft SQL server, and not MySQL, which is open source. It is also not applicable to PostgreSQL and MariaDB, because there are multiple popular SQL databases. So this is very specific to Microsoft SQL server. So yeah, I think the main objective of this video, to assist the auditors what are the things they need to take into consideration while testing this audit trail. So I hope you got a clarity. If you have any kind of questions, do comment it out so that we can discuss, I can solve it. And if you like this video, please make sure to like this video and forward with your network and colleagues. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye bye.